So, because it's Sunday, it's the beginning of the week, or the end of the week, depending on what calendar you look at, I thought it'd be a cool idea to go out there and talk about some of the main stories that happened with my favorite team, the Vancouver Canucks, that we just didn't go over throughout the week. Either because they were just, kind of smaller-ish conversations, not really the biggest deals in the world, we didn't want to make entire 8-minute videos about small things, or because they were just quips or comments on a podcast, and I don't really think it's too deep to go out there and make entire videos about those things either. So I compiled a list of a few things that happened in Canuckland the past week, and wanted to go out there and just talk about them all. So, let's start out with the biggest and probably the most sentimental thing that we had seen earlier this week, and that was Brock Boeser's appearance on the Spittin' Chicklets podcast. Now, of course, Chicklets is a long show, so there's a lot of conversations going on with Brock at the hands of the Biz Nasties of the world, the Ryan Whitneys, and everything in between. Spittin' Chicklets, episode 483, the link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to it, but a clip from Boeser on this show made the rounds throughout the week because Brock Boeser had some very positive things to say about former Canuck and current Calgary Flame, Chris Tanev. Now, this plays into all the stuff we had talked about because Chris Tanev has apparently been a primary Vancouver Canucks target. The Canucks would want to get him back, yada yada yada. But I'll leave a link in the description to this article on Canucks Army because what the writer, Mike Gold, here ends up doing is transcribing the quote from Boeser, and it's a pretty good quote, so I wanted to give a little bit of a spotlight to that. He's a top 5 beauty in the league, Brock Boeser dishes on Chris Tanev. The question on the Chicklets podcast was pretty much who was a player on the Canucks that made it easier for you to jump into the NHL, and Boeser immediately said, hey, it was Chris Tanev. He's a weapon. He's a top 5 beauty in the league for sure. He's a pro at everything. He was like a dad to me, Petey, and Huggy when he was in Vancouver. He'd always have us over for dinners and stuff. If all the boys are going out, he'll go out and be the last one there with you, and he'll be the first one in the gym the next day. You'd have no idea that he was out the night before. Brock Boeser going out there and attributing a lot of his NHL comfortability at the beginning of his career to Chris Tanev is so great to see, especially when you think about just how Boeser has evolved ever since those days of him scoring 29 goals and being stuck at that career high for years. He could have had 35 goals by now in the NHL in 2023-2024, if not for JT Miller always going offside and interfering with the goaltender. But Brock Boeser, as a 30-goal guy now, finally superseding that rookie mark, it's very nice to see that he still remembers his roots and saying that, yeah, part of what allowed me and Hughes and Petey to fit in into the NHL scene was Chris Tanev at the very beginning. He's a beauty. So that just adds more fuel to the fire, man. Canucks going out there and literally saying to the media how much Chris Tanev means to them. Hint, hint, Patrick Allvin, make this trade. Get it done. We also had ourselves a few other things that I wanted to talk about, of course, with the Canucks and their, let's just say, camaraderie. There was a post made on the Canucks TikTok account earlier today asking the players who is the best bromance on the team. I'll give big shout outs over to Kate Pedersen for doing some fantastic work. No, not Elias Pedersen, but the Canucks rinkside reporter, because a lot of the stuff that she does is really cool and it brings new life into this locker room. Essentially, they ask the players who's the best bromance on the team, and at the end of it, you could see the leaderboards here. Oman and Nils Hoglander were ranked as the best bromance with 4 Canucks players saying that they are. And then you had Zadorov and Miller tossed out as a name, Zadorov and Garland tossed out there. Connor Garland was mentioned a few times, actually. Him and JT Miller, him and Zadorov, him and Rick Tocchet even was a name that was tossed out. Some people said JT and Brock. But at the end of the day, it is kind of cool just to see that Nikita Zadorov's name popped up a lot when it comes to the best bromance, quote-unquote, on the team, considering how he's only been on the team for like a few months. In fact, here's a comment thread on the R Canucks sub in regards to that same thing. On the Boeser Spittin' Chicklets interview, he said that Miller, Zadorov, and Garland are constantly giving it to each other in the locker room. So based off of that, based off of this TikTok video, you could kind of see that the Canucks room is looking pretty good. At least it is now compared to what we had seen before. When Bruce Boudreau was here, there was that entire country club vibe that everybody said was going on. So seeing the shift now, seeing there's good camaraderie, not just between Zadorov, Miller, Garland and everybody else, but between the Swedes, Nils Hoglander and Åman getting a lot of votes here, when you could assume that, hey, the fourth line guys may not be like the most in the spotlight type of personalities, but hey, Nils Åman, even though he was an AHL guy at the beginning of the year, he still is doing some pretty good bonding with some of the teammates that are on Vancouver. Speaking about the AHL, we also had some other things to talk about in regards to a recent call-up. You had Jet Wu, who got sent down, and Arshdeep Bains from Abbotsford get called up in his place. This was a very fun move from 2 days ago that got a lot of people excited, not necessarily because Arshdeep Bains is going to become like the next first-line player or whatever, but because this is a guy who really has just worked through thick and thin. He started from nothing, he became something, and now as a 23-year-old from Surrey, BC, as a free agent signee by the Canucks a few years ago, he is now in the NHL. He hasn't played a game yet. He participated in the skate against the Winnipeg Jets, but he didn't end up playing. But with 39 points in 42 AHL games, he has been a point-per-game stud. He's been fantastic with Abbotsford. A very smart, play-driving guy who's got some skill. He does a lot of things right. And if you want to talk about a guy who's probably next in line to fill up some minutes, if somebody were to leave the lineup or somebody were to get injured, somebody were to get scratched, Arshdeep Bains is right in there. And as an underrated story of a guy from Surrey playing for his hometown team, this, of course, is so awesome and heartwarming. If you want to talk about Arshdeep Bains, we have made a few videos just going over his entire profile, what he's done up to this point. We haven't seen a game out of him in the NHL level just yet, but hopefully that comes soon. But speaking about some of the other guys that have worked themselves up from Abbotsford into the NHL, we also have a conversation to go over in regards to Nils Hoglander, because he got fined the other day, and I did not really think that was going to happen, because I'm not going to lie, when it comes to the Vancouver and Detroit games, I did not remember Nils Hoglander high-sticking Jake Wallman, but he did it, and they assessed him a fine because of it. In fact, even if you go over to the Twitter, there's a lot of people that are replying saying, wait a minute, what? Like, where? When did this happen? Well, you did have a tweet made by Wyatt Arndt from the game earlier in Vancouver that actually shows off that Hoglander did indeed get into a battle in front with Wallman, and he ended up high-sticking the guy. It's very subtle, very minute. It doesn't look like that big of a deal, but then if you replay it, you can see that Nils Hoglander swings his stick back, and it hits Wallman in the head. That's where the penalty, or should have been penalty, was executed there. The Wings did not get a power play on this play, but the NHL's got eyes. They went out there and reviewed it, and it's why Hoglander got that fine. Kind of lucky it wasn't a suspension, though, honestly, considering the state of the NHL and the NHL's player safety right now. Like, anything can be a big suspension if you let it go to the right places. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about some of these Canucks stories, from Brock Boeser speaking out on Chris Tanev to the romances on the team. You've got Boeser and Miller, you've got Miller and Zadorov, Garland and Miller, and then of course Nils Hoglander and Nils Åman. What are your thoughts on Nils Hoglander's suspension, or not suspension, oh, excuse me, could have been a suspension, who really knows, but the fine that he had gotten, as well as Arshdeep Bains working himself into the Vancouver Canucks roster. Not lineup just yet, but he's on the roster, and we'll see if he actually cracks that lineup sometime in the next few days here. Maybe tomorrow against Minnesota. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Canucks stories from the past week. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.